My wife was dead? That was the only thought I could hold on to as I sat in that hard plastic chair in the hospital corridor, staring at the linoleum floor. The doctor had already said the words, "cardiac event, too sudden." Nothing they could have done, and somewhere behind me, my son was crying quietly into his hands. I heard him. I just couldn't move. 41 years? 41 years and 4 months, to be exact. We met in October, married the following spring, raised 2 children in a house on Birchwood Lane that still had her handwriting on the inside of the pantry door heights of the grandkids, pencil marks going back 8 years. I kept thinking about those pencil marks. Who was going to measure the grandkids now? A nurse had offered me coffee twice. I'd said no both times without looking up. It was past midnight when I finally made myself stand. My son had gone to make phone calls to his sister, to the funeral home, to all the people who needed to know. I told him I just needed some air, and I walked down the corridor toward the exit at the far end of the building. That's when the old man stepped out from a supply room and put his hand on my arm. He was maybe 70, heavy-set, with a gray mustache and eyes that had seen too much of this particular hallway. His name badge said Carl. He was wearing the pale blue uniform of the hospital housekeeping staff, and he was holding a mop he clearly wasn't using. "Mr. Hargrove," he said. I stopped. I didn't know this man. "Yes?" He looked both ways down the corridor. His grip on my arm tightened just slightly, not aggressive, more like he was steadying himself as much as me. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I need you to not react. Can you do that?" I stared at him. "Who are you?" "Someone your wife trusted." He reached into the front pocket of his uniform and pulled out a small white envelope, the kind you'd get with a greeting card, and pressed it into my hand. "She gave me this 3 weeks ago. She told me that if anything ever happened to her, anything at all, I was supposed to find you and give you this before you left the building." My fingers closed around the envelope. It was thin. Something small inside it, paper, maybe a card. 3 weeks ago, I repeated. "Yes, sir." "She knew?" He didn't answer that. Instead, he said, "There's an address written inside. She made me memorize it too, in case the envelope got lost." She was thorough like that. Something passed over his face, not quite a smile, but close. She was a very thorough woman. "Why are you giving this to me here?" "Why not?" "Because she specifically said not to let you go home first." He held my gaze. "She was very clear about that. Don't go home. Not tonight. Not until you've gone to that address." I looked down at the envelope in my hand. My wife's name was not on it. My name was not on it. It was completely blank on the outside, sealed with the little metal clasp bent flat. "Carl," I said slowly, "what exactly did my wife tell you?" He let go of my arm and took a step back toward the supply room. "That she loved you more than you would ever fully understand, and that she was sorry for what was about to be the hardest night of your life." He paused. "She also said to tell you that the hydrangeas by the back fence need water every other day in August. Not every day. She said you always overwater them." I couldn't breathe. That was not something anyone could have known. Not a doctor, not a neighbor, not a family friend. That was a conversation my wife and I had last summer, standing in the backyard in our bare feet arguing gently about the hydrangeas while the grandkids played on the grass. A completely private, completely ordinary moment. Carl went back into the supply room and closed the door. I stood alone in that corridor for a long time, the envelope in my hand, my son somewhere behind me making phone calls, my wife somewhere in this building in a room I couldn't bring myself to walk back to. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single index card. On it, in my wife's handwriting I'd know it anywhere, she always pressed too hard with the pen, left little indentations on the card beneath were 8 words and a number. "Go to Riverside Station. Locker 38. The key fits." There was no key in the envelope. I checked again. Nothing. I read the card 3 more times. Then I turned it over. On the back, same handwriting, 1 line. "It was always to keep you safe. I'm sorry." I folded the card and put it in my jacket pocket. I walked back to where my son was sitting and told him I needed to step outside, that I'd be back in an hour, that he should call me if anything came up with the arrangements. He looked at me with red eyes and nodded, too exhausted to question it. I walked out of the hospital into the November air. Riverside Station was 4 miles away. I'd driven past it 1,000 times. It was the old Greyhound terminal, still operating but smaller now than it had been. One of those places that always seems like it exists slightly outside of normal time. I pulled into the parking lot at 12:40 in the morning and sat in my car for a moment, looking at the entrance. What was I doing? My wife had just died. My son was back at the hospital. I was 63 years old, sitting in a parking lot in the middle of the night because a hospital janitor had handed me a note. But then I thought about the hydrangeas. I got out of the car. The station was nearly empty at that hour. Just a few travelers sleeping across seats and a man behind the ticket counter who didn't look up when I walked in. The lockers were along the far wall, a row of them in 2 different sizes, numbered from 1 to 60. I found 38 near the middle of the row. Medium-sized, gray metal with a standard key lock. I reached into my jacket pocket for the index card again. Locker 38, the key fits. There was no key. I stood there like an idiot for a moment, patting my pockets, checking my jacket, my pants, back to my jacket. No key. I reread the card. The key fits. Present tense. As if I already had it. Then I checked my coat. The long winter coat I'd thrown on before leaving the house when my son called me about the hospital, the coat that had been hanging by the front door for weeks. I reached into the left pocket and my fingers found something small and metal. I pulled it out. A small key, silver, with a paper tag attached. On the tag, in that same pressed-too-hard handwriting, 38. She had put it there. At some point, days ago, weeks ago, my wife had put a key in my coat pocket and said nothing. My hand was shaking as I pushed the key into the lock. It turned on the first try. Inside the locker was a manila envelope, thick, the clasp reinforced with tape. Underneath it was a prepaid cell phone, the cheap kind you buy at a drugstore, already powered on. And beneath that, a photograph. I picked up the photograph first. It was my wife. But not recently. She looked younger, maybe early 40s, and she was standing in what looked like a government building, fluorescent lighting, gray carpet, a water cooler visible in the background. She was standing next to a man I didn't recognize, middle-aged, dark suit, and they were both looking at something off camera. The man in the suit had a badge clipped to his belt. I turned the photograph over. On the back, "This is Agent Donovan." He kept his word. So did I. I opened the manila envelope. There were documents inside. A lot of them. I'm not a lawyer and I don't pretend to understand legal language, but I understood enough. Witness statements. A deposition dated 11 years ago. Financial records. A name, Gerald Foss, repeated throughout every document and notes about wire fraud, money laundering, connections to organized crime that stretched across 3 states. At the very back of the stack was a letter. 4 pages, handwritten, the same pressed too hard pen. I sat down on the floor of Riverside Station at 1 in the morning, my back against the lockers, and I read my wife's letter. She had witnessed something 11 years ago. She'd been working part-time doing bookkeeping for a property management company. I remembered that job. She'd taken it after the kids left home, said she needed something to do with her brain and she had found the discrepancies by accident. She wasn't looking for them. She'd just been entering invoices and the numbers didn't add up, and when she went looking for why they didn't add up, she found Gerald Foss. She described what she found in plain language, the kind of language she used to explain things to the grandkids. Property holdings that existed on paper but not in reality, rents collected for empty buildings, millions of dollars moved through shell companies into accounts that fed back to men who didn't advertise their names. She had gone to the FBI. She wrote that she had gone to them because she didn't know what else to do, and because she was afraid, and because there was a moment, she described it clearly, where a man she didn't know had sat in a car outside our house on Birchwood Lane for 4 hours and then driven away, and she had understood in her bones that this was not a coincidence. She had worked with Agent Donovan for 7 months before the case went to federal court. She had given testimony. She had been careful. She had, in her words, done everything right. Gerald Foss went to prison. 3 of his associates went to prison. The case was closed. But some cases don't stay closed. 2 months ago, she wrote, she had seen something. A car she recognized, not Foss. He was still incarcerated, but someone connected to him. She hadn't been sure at first, but then it happened again, and she had called Agent Donovan, whose number she had kept in a place I never would have found, and he had confirmed her fear. People connected to Foss knew about her. They had known for a while, and they had been patient. She wrote that Donovan offered her protective measures, surveillance, options. She had said she needed to think about it. She went home. She looked at me across the dinner table, and I had no idea that anything was wrong, because my wife was the most composed woman I have ever known. She asked me how my day was. I told her about the hydrangeas. She wrote that she spent 3 weeks trying to decide what to do. And then she made a decision. The letter continued on the 3rd page, and this is where I had to stop reading for a moment because my vision blurred, and I had to press the back of my hand against my eyes and just breathe. She wrote that the decision she made was not about her. It was about me, and our son, and our daughter, and the grandchildren. She wrote that she had seen what happened to families who became leverage. She had read the case files. Donovan had let her read them, and she knew what leverage looked like and what it did to people. She wrote, I decided that the safest thing I could do for all of you was to no longer be something they could use. I know that sounds like logic. It's also love. I need you to understand that it is both. The prepaid phone in the locker began to ring. I grabbed it. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my ears. Hello? Silence for a moment. Then a voice I had heard every day for 41 years. Harold. I couldn't speak. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. I know, she said. I know. I'm so sorry. I need you to stay calm and I need you to listen to me, and I promise you I will explain everything. But right now I need to know, did you go home after the hospital? No, I managed. I'm at the station. I found the locker. Good. I heard her exhale. Good. That's good. You're alive. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like something scraped hollow. You're alive. I'm alive. I'm safe. I'm somewhere, Donovan arranged. A pause. The woman who died tonight in that hospital, they found her 2 weeks ago, Harold. A woman who looked enough like me. Same age, same general description, terminal diagnosis, no family. She agreed to help. I know how that sounds. I know, I'll explain all of it. You faked your death. I wasn't accusing her. I was just saying the words out loud to see if they were real. I did. Our son is back at the hospital right now. He's been crying for 3 hours. Her voice broke. Just slightly, just for a moment, and then she pulled it back together the way she always pulled things back together. I know. That's the part that was hardest. That's the part I've been. She stopped. There are people who would use him to get to me, Harold. Our son, our daughter, the babies. I couldn't. I needed them to believe it. For now. Just for now. How long is now? Donovan says the men who were watching the house made a mistake 2 weeks ago. Federal jurisdiction. They're being picked up tonight. Or they already have been. He'll call me in the morning. Her voice was very quiet. If that goes the way it's supposed to go, I can come home. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. I looked at the documents spread across my lap. 11 years of something she had carried without ever once letting me see the weight of it. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because you would have tried to fix it. I almost laughed. My eyes were wet, and I almost laughed. That's probably true. You would have marched into something you didn't understand and gotten yourself killed because that's what you do? I could hear something in her voice now. Something that was almost fondness even in the middle of all this. You've been trying to fix things your whole life. I love that about you. I've also spent 40 years making sure it doesn't get you killed. So, this whole time, I was protecting us. Badly, maybe. Maybe there was a better way, and I didn't see it. But I didn't know what else to do, and I was terrified. And the one thing I knew for certain was that I was not going to let those men touch our family. I leaned my head back against the metal lockers. Above me, the fluorescent lights hummed. "The card?" I said. "In the envelope. It said to go to the address before I went home. Why? Because Donovan's people need to sweep the house before you go back. They'll be done by morning." A beat. "I also didn't want you to be alone in that house tonight with your thoughts and no answers. I know what you're like when you're alone with your thoughts." "What am I like?" "Stubborn and catastrophic," she said. In that order. This time I did make a sound that was almost a laugh, and it hurt in a way I didn't have a word for. We talked for a long time. She told me the full story, not the abbreviated version from the letter, the full version. From the first discrepancy she found in those invoices, to the night she sat across from Agent Donovan for the first time, to the afternoon, 3 weeks ago, when she put a key in my coat pocket and rehearsed how to say goodbye to a man she had no intention of actually leaving. She told me about Carl. She had known Carl for years. He was someone Donovan trusted, someone who had helped on other cases, a quiet man who had watched a lot of grief walk through that hospital corridor and wanted to do something useful with what he'd seen. She said he was one of the few people who knew what was really happening. She told me about the photograph, that she'd kept it because Agent Donovan was the one person outside our family she had trusted completely, and she'd wanted me to know his face in case I ever needed to find him. She told me about the woman who had made this possible. I asked if I could know her name, and my wife said softly that there wasn't one anymore, that she'd had no family and no one looking for her, and that she had chosen this herself, and that my wife had held her hand at the end and promised to remember her. I didn't ask any more questions about that. Around 2 in the morning, she asked me how I was. "I thought about that for a while. I spent 3 hours thinking you were gone," I said. 3 hours sitting in that hospital thinking about the hydrangeas and the pencil marks on the pantry door and 41 years of mornings that were just gone. No warning, gone. I stopped, and now I'm sitting on the floor of a bus station at 2 in the morning, and you're on the other end of a prepaid phone, and I don't know if I'm furious or relieved or both at the same time. "Both is probably accurate," she said. "Yeah, Harold. Yeah. I need you to know something." Her voice had changed quieter now, stripped of all the logistics and explanations. "I need you to know that there was not one moment in the past 3 weeks when I didn't think about the cost of this. Not one moment when I didn't think about what it would do to you and to our son and our daughter. I ran the numbers 100 times. I looked for another way. Did you find one?" "No," she said simply. "I found this way, and I took it. And I will spend the rest of my life being sorry for the hours I put you through tonight, and I will also spend the rest of my life knowing that you are safe because I made that choice. Both of those things are true. I need you to let both of them be true." I thought about the letter. I decided that the safest thing I could do for all of you was to no longer be something they could use. I know that sounds like logic. It's also love. "You should have told me," I said again. But this time it didn't have the same weight to it. "I know. We could have figured it out together, Harold." Her voice was gentle. "You would have gotten yourself killed. You don't know that. I know exactly that. You've been trying to fix things since 1987, and it has never once occurred to you to consider whether you are physically capable of fixing a given thing before you start fixing it." A pause. "Remember the roof. The roof was different. You fell off the roof. I caught myself. You caught yourself on the gutter. The gutter came off the house. I closed my eyes. In 30 years of memory, the roof argument had always been hers to win, and apparently that was not changing tonight. 'Come home,' I said. 'As soon as Donovan says it's clear, come home.' 'I will. Soon. As soon as I can.' I gathered up the documents from the locker and put them back in the manila envelope. I held the prepaid phone in my hand and thought about my son back at the hospital, exhausted and grieving, making arrangements for a funeral that would need to be unmade. "Our son," I said. "I know." Her voice was tight with it. I can't ask you to lie to him. I can't ask you to do that. But I need just a little more time before Donovan calls you in the morning?" Yes. And if everything goes the way it's supposed to go, then I'll call him myself. I'll explain it myself. Harold, I know there's no version of this that doesn't hurt him. I know that. But I'd rather tell him the truth than have him grieve me for years. He's going to be angry. He gets that from you. I stood up from the floor slowly, my knees reminding me that I was 63 years old and had just spent an unknown amount of time sitting on a bus station floor. I tucked the envelope under my arm. "Where will you go tonight?" she asked. "I don't know." "Not home?" you said. "There's a Holiday Inn on Route 9. Donovan booked a room under the name Peterson. The front desk has a key. You should get some sleep, Harold. I mean it. You need to sleep. You're arranging hotel rooms while you're hiding from organized crime. Someone has to." A quiet beat. "I've been arranging things for 41 years. I'm not going to stop because of a minor inconvenience." I stood in the empty bus station with my wife's voice in my ear, all of it still pouring through me, the grief and the shock and the relief and everything else that didn't have a name yet, and I thought about what she'd said in the letter. I know that sounds like logic. It's also love. I need you to understand that it is both. I understood it. I didn't like all of it. And I suspected that in the days and weeks ahead, I would find parts of it that still made me angry, and parts that made me sad, and parts that I would turn over in my mind trying to find the place where something different could have happened. But underneath all of that, in the place where I had spent 41 years building something with this woman, I understood it. She had stood at the edge of something terrifying, and her first thought had been to put herself between it and the people she loved. That was her. That had always been her. I had just never seen it at this scale. "I'll call you from the hotel," I said. "I'll be up." "Of course you will." "Harold, yeah, I love you. I need you to hold on to that tonight, even when the rest of it is too much. Just hold on to that one thing." I held on to it. Standing there at Locker 38, in the fluorescent hum of Riverside Station, in the wreckage of the hardest night of my life, I held on to it with both hands. "I love you too," I said. "Get some rest." "I will when you will. Then we'll both be up all night." "Probably," she said. And in her voice, underneath everything, I heard something I thought I'd lost 3 hours ago. I heard tomorrow. I walked out of the station into the cold, the manila envelope under my arm and the prepaid phone in my pocket, and I sat in my car for a while before I started the engine. Donovan called her at 7 the next morning. The men who had been watching our house, 3 of them, connected to Foss through 2 layers of shell company and 1 layer of informal arrangement, were in federal custody. The case, the original case, was reopening. My wife's testimony was going to matter again. She came home on a Thursday. 11 days later. She came home on a Thursday afternoon in November, and I was standing in the front yard when the car pulled up, and when she got out I didn't say anything for a long time. I just looked at her standing there in the November light in the front yard of the house on Birchwood Lane, alive. Our son had a week that I can only describe as complicated. He is his mother's child in his composure, and his father's child in his stubbornness, and there was an afternoon in my living room that was loud and painful and necessary. But my wife sat across from him and told him everything, the same way she told me no shortcuts, no softening, the full weight of it, and at the end of it he sat very still for a long time and then asked her a question that I hadn't thought to ask. "Were you scared?" he said. "Every single day," she told him. He nodded slowly. And then he crossed the room and put his arms around his mother. And that was the afternoon I understood that forgiveness isn't something you decide to give. It's something that arrives when you finally see the whole picture, when you see not just the wound but the love that caused it, not just the lie but the truth it was built around. My daughter is still working through it. She's more like me, she processes slower, holds things longer. I told her recently that her mother and I had been married for 41 years, and in that time I had learned exactly one reliable truth about her mother. And the truth is this: she will always, always put the people she loves first. Sometimes it's inconvenient. Sometimes it looks like something else entirely. But underneath whatever it looks like, it's the same thing it's always been. My daughter said that didn't excuse the deception. I said she was right. It didn't. I said it was also love. I said both things were true at the same time, and that was the hardest part of loving someone for a long time, learning to hold two true things at once without needing to resolve them into one. She thought about that for a while. The hydrangeas by the back fence did not get watered properly while my wife was gone. They looked a little rough by the time she got back. She stood in the backyard looking at them with her arms crossed, and I stood next to her and said nothing because I knew what was coming. "Every other day," she said, "in August, I left you very clear instructions." "I had a lot on my mind," I said. She looked at me sideways. Then she looked back at the hydrangeas. "They'll come back," she said. And standing there in the yard on Birchwood Lane, in the November cold with the woman I had thought I'd lost, I understood that she was not only talking about the flowers. Before you walk away from anything that matters, any relationship, any person, any piece of your life you think you understand, try to look at it from the outside first. Try to see what they were carrying that they never showed you. Try to see all the ordinary mornings that were quiet because someone you loved was quietly keeping something at bay. You may not agree with how they did it. You may have done it differently. But love and logic are not enemies. Sometimes they walk in together, wearing each other's coats, and it takes a long time to tell them apart. They'll come back.